Welcome to and also
Season 2.
Season 2. How exciting is that we made it to Season 2, Episode 1, where Kirk Steigler and I, John Eager, talk about the previous week's message at Faith Alliance Church. I'm still not over the fact that we made it to Season 2.
We lived.
We have survived. We're rested. We're back. And we're picking things up right where we left off, but in a new passage. Our point and intent is to talk about the previous week's message and with an and also flair, meaning how do we actually make sense of what the scripture said, what I said or whoever was preaching said, what does it mean for us in our just normal everyday thinking in life. So that's what we do. And the past 2 weeks, I have been in Acts 17 when Paul was in Athens. It's Acts 17, verses 16 to 34. Paul is in Athens, and he ends up preaching on the Areopagus. I had to practice that. And in doing so, he talks about the God of the to the unknown God, and talks about Jesus and the resurrection. So anyway, that's where we're picking up, and the point is to talk about how we as Christians can engage in our culture. So all that said, as far as intro is concerned, now gets left for Kirk to make meaning of it.
What? Oh, yay! So this whole chapter is really funny in a way. I mean, not so great things happen, but I just like that Paul here on this part of the journey is just a cork floating down the river. He's just going from town to town to town, and people are agitated and say, move it along.
Well, and even, that's just a funny image of like a cork floating down the river, because he's basically just sightseeing in Athens. It becomes this like sermon that we've been reading for 2,000 years, and he's just waiting for Silas and Timothy, and he's just hanging out. He's looking around. He's like, oh, this is what Athens is, and that's so it is. It's just kind of like
unsinkable, right? So you just getting booted from place to place, including
unsinkable.
A town where our children just came back from a winter retreat. Which I thought was really funny that there's no book of Berea, but you get sent to Berea.
It goes to Berea.
Where people are more noble. I like that it's listed as noble in the description in the NIV. Much more noble. They listen. They don't.
Because that's the nobility. That's funny.
They listen. They don't just argue. But yeah, how fascinating. You're just going from place to place to place, but then ends up getting sent. Where's a safe place we can put them? Go to Athens. There's a lot of people there. You'll just blend in. And he goes, and he hangs out, and wanders around. And that part fascinates me, because a man's got to sleep and eat. And granted, he's a tent maker, but I'm pretty sure you can't just set up a tent in Athens. So he's wandering around and meeting people. He has to, right? Because he's in the marketplace.
That's true.
Having discussions. He finds his way to a synagogue and has discussions in there. But yeah, he's meeting people and networking. To the point where in a city where people are doing nothing but talking, he gets singled out as the babbler, which I was like, wow.
I know, what a name. You're right, because that's all they do. It's in verse 21, the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. And Paul's the babbler.
Yep. That says a lot. Like, wow, what's this babbler talking about? So I think that part is fascinating, that you have a city, right? So this is a place where there's commerce happening, there's stuff going on. People are, in order to live together in a place like that, there has to be resources and there has to be trade. But if all they're doing is talking all the time, then that's amazing. So they're getting it done despite all the jibber jabber.
Somehow.
Yeah. But to have a separate place specially allocated to discuss ideas, I think is interesting too. So nowadays we call that the comment section, but at that time people actually just stood up and said things
Face to face.
face to face,
Shocking.
face to many faces. So it's interesting that they drag him there, or they don't really drag him there. They invite him there, I think is what it says.
Yeah.
So he's invited to go to Areopagus, right? And
Did you say snuffleupagus?
Snuffleupagus.
Snuffleupagus? Is that it?
So Snuffleupagus, Areopagus, easy to remember, right?
It's
Almost the same,
it's almost,
spelled differently.
It's almost the same. Yeah.
So, yeah, he gets taken to the hill of Ares, which is
Right.
what that translates to,
Yeah.
right? So he gets taken there, and people start to talk, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. Hey, folks," and he just gets up, and talks. That's what it says he did.
In the midst of the Areopagus,
Yeah.
Men of Athens, I perceive. Yeah,
He just
you're
stands
right.
there. Hey, I got this
It's a
thing.
very Pauline thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Yeah.
When's dinner? And yeah, so he starts talking about what he's seen, and that's the part that gives away that he's been a tourist in town for a little while,
Right.
and that's fascinating. So he's been, how long do you wait for your compatriots to come? We'll be there in later, a week, 2 weeks, a month. It doesn't say. He's just hanging out.
No, it says as soon as possible. That's all we know.
As soon as possible.
It could be a week, month. Yeah.
Yeah. So there he is wandering Athens. And now, again, he doesn't have a cell phone. How will they find him?
Right.
Because everyone knows he is the babbler.
He's
That's
the
how
babbler.
they're going to... Have you seen my friend, the babbler? Ah, yes.
At the Areopagus.
We know him. He's just hanging out over here.
Well, you know what I really like about this passage is, I mean, all the to the unknown God stuff is his cultural exegesis, his ability to understand the culture is just stellar. But like I like that there's a list here where it says the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him and then as well as the devout Jews. It says that somewhere as well. With the Jews and the devout persons, and then the Epicureans and Stoic philosophers. So I just like that Paul's not discerning when it comes to who he talks to. He'll talk to the philosophers. He'll talk to the devout Jews. He'll talk just whoever the men of Athens as at the Areopagus. Like he's just kind of like reasoning with all of them. He feels like Christ can cross those boundaries. That the gospel crosses those boundaries. And I like that that he's not discerning, like, well, it should really only go to this. Or we should really only speak to the devout Jews, definitely not the Epicureans, or definitely the Stoics.
Well,
but,
when you consider his origin, right?
well,
His origin
yeah, that's
story.
a good point. That's a great point.
So starting off, killing off the guy who was in charge of helping the rich, the poor alike, right?
Yeah.
Who were, in charge of meals and distribution of what's necessary, basically, necessary items. Starting there, and then getting blinded on the way to shut down another church.
Yeah.
And now having to come back and meet and learn about the way that you just were knocking down, you are now part of.
Oh.
So to that group, those initial believers that were being dispersed, right, scattered in the beginning, he had to meet them, and they had to be from all walks of life, slave and free, right? So I think probably early on, knowing that class is irrelevant here, right? It just simply it has to be the fertile soil, right, where the seed lands.
Yeah.
And who knows where that is? Just off it goes, right? So whoever can hear, who knows where the answer will be.
Yeah.
That part, I think, stuck with him, I'm sure, from those early days. But then to also remember that he was somebody who practiced debating in the synagogue
true. Yeah.
from the get-go.
This would have been his bread and butter.
Arguing with people.
Yeah.
He was a trained pro.
Yeah.
So being able to find your facts and stick to them and present logical arguments about them was exactly what the Greeks needed, right? Because these are people who are looking for logic in things. And then to be able to debate these things also and point out the scriptures exactly where these things are spoken works for the Jewish folks.
Right.
And everybody in between, which is where he gets to the unknown God part, which the illogical conclusion, which is the summation of all of it. I love that.
That to the unknown God is a summation of all of their belief.
Yeah, because you have a God for everything.
Right.
For everything, right?
Yeah.
You got everything covered, and I'm sure we forgot one, right? We're leaving something out, right? Or somebody's being forgotten, but let's make a shrine to them, whoever that is. And that part fascinates me because they would have had carved idols for all the others.
Yeah.
So if this one is unknown, they could not have carved anything. It would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it says, I found an altar. Yeah, with this inscription.
So there would
So it was
have
an
been
altar
no
with an
one.
inscription. It wasn't a statue.
Which is, again, where he points out that, I saw this altar to this unknown God, and then goes on to say later that, our God is not formed in gold or, carvings by the arts, and he specifically labels arts.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, we've seen these things in museums. The detail is amazing.
Yeah.
To understand, human form and that kind of thing. To be able to carve like that, that's incredible stuff. But there's nothing there, because they don't know who it is.
Right.
And he says, correct. Which is great. So there's nothing there that you can see, because bigger than all.
Right.
In all, through all, right? And you can't carve anything that's going to look or be like,
right,
or encapsulate.
It's not going to work.
It isn't that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of awesome that's the one he picks and uses.
I love it. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite points in the scripture, because I think one of my because I think about, okay, what does this mean for today? Why does this make any difference today? And I think because Paul he reasons, which is an argument. It's a debate, but he does so on equal footing, right? So when he's reasoning with somebody, he's reasoning because they have agreed to reason with him. It's not he's not just yelling his opinion, right? They're both like trying to work it out. But then when he goes to the unknown God, he's using their techniques on himself. He's saying, look, kind of what you're saying. He's saying, look, I agree with you. Like I'm with you on this, but I'm just telling you now that he's got a name. And so thinking about where we are now, I appreciate that he's not contentious about it. He's not arguing with them.
Right.
He's not saying I'm right, you're wrong. He is right.
I'm with you.
He's right. He's using this. I mean, it's just brilliant, because he's using this thing to say, yeah, I'm with you in this, and
here's what that really is.
I want you to know that this is Jesus. I know this unknown God that you don't have a name for. I know his name. But again, it's not this I'm right, you're wrong, this my opinion matters, yours doesn't, this I'm going to type louder and faster and better than you, and you're it's not this us or them.
Right.
Paul's not. He's trying to use reason and argumentation in the right way, in the right sense of argumentation, debate, for them to understand what their own desires and objects of worship mean. And the only way he can do that is because he's obviously paid attention. Like, he hasn't just kind of jumped into the culture and been like, look, he does eventually gets up, like you said, and says, hey, I'm going to Men of Athens. But he's spent some time.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he's not doing the Jonah bit where repent or die.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which
it's just
what a happy story that is. But when you get to, he does say repent.
He does, yeah.
After buttering them up and saying, you guys are clearly very religious, and here's why, right? Here's what you're looking
yeah,
for.
and you're clearly very religious. So he's looking to what they already are, and he's saying, you see all this, you just haven't connected all the dots. And that's just such a different line of reasoning. I'll keep using that word than I see happening now. I'll say that it's a different apologetic, like a means to help people influence and understand who Christ is a different apologetic than we're using now. We're using actually our apologetic now is defensive. That's all we're using is but Paul, it's honestly just surgical. It's wonderful how he like lifts them up. You are very religious. Look at this. Look at what I found. To the unknown God, and and then he goes on.
He's clearly enjoyed his time debating in the marketplace, and maybe because he hadn't been beaten or thrown in jail. And
this was a good one.
And harried out of town like everywhere else.
Yeah.
These people are like, that's a weird idea. Let's hear all about that. Which is, I love that when they get down to the resurrection, some people are like, really? And the rest of them are like, wait, tell us more.
I'd like to hear more.
Yeah.
Well, and to that, just to close off at least the passage, I think it's worthwhile pointing out too, because as I'm trying to, not only on Sunday, but even tonight, just trying to bridge these ideas between ancient Greece and then modern Attleboro, is like at the end of it, and I didn't cover this on Sunday, but it says, now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, this is what you're talking about. Some mocked, like, but others said, we will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, and some men joined him and believed, among whom were also Dionysius, the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So they could name the people, mostly the people who believed, meaning that
those people were significant.
Right, but also meaning that there weren't like a bunch. There was a small group of people that believed.
A handful, but the significant handful, because those are leaders, local leaders.
And that's good. Who are also down to the woman. So he's got leaders coming, and then he's also, he also has. There's not, back in Acts 2, there's, what is it, 3,000, 5,000, 5,000 joined them, and you look at that and you're like, how come? What's going on? What's the gap? But then you see this and you're like, okay, this sounds more normative.
But it's significant that it's the leadership.
And that might be, talk about that for a second.
So it's significant that it's the leadership because these are the people leading these debates, leading the discussions that are occurring in this place, and then and responsible for this place, right? It's their role, right? So people who are responsible for having the open discussion of all these ideas, including people who don't believe in life after death, right? Who are the scoffers and that, right? So among the groups of varying concepts that are under, or at least all seated together, we don't know if they're the group, right? So they're all seated together and discussing these ideas. That small argument that gets written down by someone, not the two companions he's waiting for, clearly, because they weren't there. But someone writes down what he says, and that's enough to make them go, whoa, hey, I'm on board with this guy. Though I've been doing this for however many years, maybe grew up doing it. To completely change perspectives and realize that there's a solution that he's offered that has completely radically changed a worldview. Like a worldview. So to go from every day, as you mentioned, right? Every day, this God's influencing how my day is going. This God's influencing how my day.
That's true.
Suddenly, all that out the window. There's this one. And we've been missing. All along.
And that's a huge. You're right. That's not.
It's a sea change.
It's not tiny.
Yeah.
That's not tiny. That's
So to go from leading this in that direction all the time to suddenly going, whoa, hey, and perhaps see, it isn't just they became buddies, right? Because hey, I also like to discuss ideas, right?
Right.
It isn't that.
That's true.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
Convinced and joined. So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating.
And it's it's we don't always look at in New Testament um, uh, in the New Testament world, in the first century world, just how significant. Just I want to circle back to that idea of worldview change. Just how significant that was, because it's not like So I could make an argument, and I've been working through this in my mind that the the change that was required of them then is similar to the change that's required of people now, except for as far as uh, Christianity being dissimilar to the culture. Christianity and the culture are kind of disconnected at this point, except for the difference was we can look back and say, okay, well, at least for us to believe, at least we have 2,000 years of history to back us up. For these people to believe, they had nothing.
We got
So they hear about
30
this.
years,
Yeah, they hear about this guy named Jesus from this guy named Paul, and they throw everything away to follow Christ without any real historical backing of it. It is pretty phenomenal to see them shift and change belief.
And then just to point something else out amazing. So Paul probably had to read at least Hebrew in the synagogue. Spoke to the centurions in Latin,
Yeah.
and now is debating with Greeks in Greek.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible to be able to convey your ideas no matter what.
Yeah. And that would track with Paul's education.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is. And again, not that I can read it in Greek, but you lose something when you read all of it in one language. You lose the fact
meanings,
that
yeah.
the fact that Paul is traveling around and the language has changed. Depending on the Roman oversight of the area would have changed. Latin. And you lose that when you recognize just how intelligent Paul would have had to have been, and how God used him to move the gospel, throughout the pre-modern world.
But just this whole section is it's the whole chapter is just kind of fascinating. Like, who's writing this down?
Right? Yeah.
Who's the note taker? Because that guy was busy.
Can you say it again, Paul?
Yeah. Wait. What? Yeah.
Louder, maybe. So what do we? So what do we? What do we do with this? I don't always think everything needs like a definitive application. Here are now the 3 things that we must do in order to blah blah blah. I'm not saying that, but I guess what as we kind of close off this passage, what can we be thinking about as far as what are modern implications?
So, a way to look at it is, how have we thought about there's God in the background, right? The unknown God. God's in the background, and everything else, right, has taken a precedence.
God's in the background.
Right, that's a way. The unknown God.
So
We're aware of it. We're aware of God because we hear about it a lot.
Yeah.
And He's out there somewhere, and must be okay, right? And in the end of life, you sure hope you're okay, right?
So what is that like? What would an unknown God? I love that God in the background. What would the unknown God be today? What would that look like?
Well, for folks who are not, waking up and going to sleep, in constant states of prayer, right? As Paul talks about, perpetually praying. If you're just living your life and bumbling through and feeling, this is the government's fault, this is, that guy's fault, this lady's fault, whatever. Hey, when's the last time you had a chat? Is a way. I think it's easy in our current culture to be distracted. We have a lot. In the room that you and I are sitting in right this instant, there are 7 screens. There's plenty.
And that's not even all of them.
Right? So that's
There's
the
some
ones
in
that
my
are
bag.
visible.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So that I can see here. So there's plenty to distract us.
Yeah.
Also, there are many, many, many books.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how much can occupy our thoughts and our what our focus, what part of our focus becomes a worship of a thing,
Yeah.
worship of an idea, occupies all of our mental processing.
And that becomes, I agree, that
Yeah.
kind of becomes...
That's a worship.
I would
So
agree.
rather than turning to the one who, had no trouble starting off the universe,
Right.
right? So why not talk to that guy? People forget and so that God who's there's a church every like 300 feet in some New England towns, right? So though there are churches and spires pointing up everywhere, people pass by them, and it doesn't have to be the church, right? That's a thing that's people get lost on because the church, in air quotes, has gotten their name on things that aren't so great throughout history.
Agreed.
Some things that are great. Mother Teresa, great. Right?
Universities and hospitals.
University and hospitals, great. Hey, you can read. Great.
Yeah.
So, first printing press.
Right.
Great. Right? So, lots of things that were great. And then, greed sneaks in where people were and other awful things, right? But
No
all
one
that
expects the
aside,
Spanish Inquisition.
no one expected it. But all that aside, the reason that we should be, and the reason that you and I are in this room talking, is because of a God we know. People forget, and it's easy to not pay attention to the still small voice.
I think, I know we talk, not we as in you and I, but we as in people in the culture talk about distractions and how distracted we are, and I think we undersell how distracted we are. So we talk a lot about it, right? So it's
Another distraction.
Right, yeah. it's in our target range to understand that we are distracted people. I think we undersell it because I think we are so distracted, we don't even know what it feels like to think about bigger things anymore. It's like, so like I contend that our hearts are always longing for transcendence or something larger than ourselves. That I think God placed in there for us to seek after God, and that's what Paul talks about. But I think we're so caught up in distractions, we don't even have time to think about the bigger things, let alone act on them. Because the minute we finish thinking about one thing, there's another thing. And whether that's, you can name whatever world issue you want, Ukraine or otherwise, right? But then it's not only the events themselves, it's also the perpetual information about those events that come in at any given time.
We haven't learned to turn the faucet off.
No, and the faucet just has like unlimited amounts of pressure. It just keeps getting. I just read an article about somebody who did something. I can't even remember what they did because it was so asinine. It had nothing to do with anything. But whatever it is that they did made not only national news, but it happened in Britain, so it made international news. And here I am reading about it yesterday or the day before, whatever it was, and I thought my thought was, like, I don't even care if that happens in my house, let alone in England.
But here I am.
But here I am reading an article about some joker doing something that's just like nominal. That means And then it just became this big thing in this article. So it's not only the actual stuff that we should be there are things in the world that we should obviously be paying attention to, but it's just the fact that it's like everything's asking us to pay attention to it, and so how do we even think beyond that? And I think that's one of the biggest gods or whatever, one of the biggest distraction itself. That's a hard one for me to undersell or to oversell because there's so much distraction in it. So anyway, well, any last thoughts on how we round out Paul at the Areopagus with Snuffleupagus?
That'll never go away now.
No, it won't ever go away. The Snuffleupagus, the Greek philosopher, and
the lone Greek philosopher on Sesame Street.
Oh gosh. All right. Anything to round that out?
No.
All right. Season 2.
Season 2, episode 1.
Episode 1 ends with a bang. Next time we will be talking about Ephesians. We'll be in the book of Ephesians for a while.
They get a book. Berea didn't get a book.
Berea doesn't get a book, but Ephesians does.
Gets a book, but Berea nothing.
Poor Berea. But they're noble.
They're noble. But no
That's
book.
what we take from this, the noble Bereans.
He didn't have to write to them, I guess.
Yeah.
They're fine.
Listen, the church in Corinth got a book, but I don't think they wanted it. So maybe Berea's like, whoo, let's get that one. All right, we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining us for season 2.